decided to come early now this week. You're a lot more comfortable. It comes into that.
When I start on
Yes. I still go over there once in a while. It's hard for me to stand.
On the floor. We learned. Yes.
oh man, well that means
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's right. I always forget.
Sounds good. Need to see Skipper, you got one.
I need two.
All right. You want these two? All right, very good. Very well. I don't want this. I want Warren. Just Amy's gonna be a picture.
Welcome, everyone. I'm thankful you're coming. It's great to see you all. In the form of an announcement, next Sunday, we're going to hear a series of talks on mental health, so be sure to come next Sunday also. We're honored today to have a special day. If you're following the news, the network news, you're very grateful that you live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, right? Okay? Amen? All right. Well, part of that gratitude is due to our mayor. So, I told him we're a friendly group, so please make me honest, okay? So, Paul, thank you, our mayor.
Let me see if, all right, it's working. Sounds good. Well, thank you. Yeah, it is a good time to live in Sioux Falls, I think, but I'm very biased. So, great to see so many people here. Drew, you did make it. Drew and I worked together a million years ago, and he's like, oh, I got to leave, or he had some weak excuse. I said, come on, man. So he's here. Well, thank you for inviting me, to speak with you. I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on in the city, and then I'd love to take some questions from you all. It's about things you want to know about what's going on in our city. And this sweet young lady, if there's someone who could help her with chairs. Is that all of them? Because I offered to help. All right. So if you guys need chairs, you can come on up. Sioux Falls, last year, we just crossed 200,000 mark in terms of residents. So when I took office in 2018, so was elected in April of 2018, we've grown by over a Mitchell since that time, if you want to think of it in South Dakota terms. So we've grown by a Mitchell in my first term, and I was just looking at, last night actually, U.S. Census Bureau data, and from 20 to 21, we grew by 2% as a city. And we're the 130th largest city now in the country. There's only 4 cities that grew by a higher percentage in those top 130 cities last year, more than us. It was North Las Vegas, it was McKinney, Texas, it was Cape Coral, Florida, it was another Florida city, but it was Florida cities, Texas cities, and then Sioux Falls was 5th in terms of growth. So that's very exciting in some ways. It's very nerve-wracking in other ways, if I'm just being really honest with you. Sometimes growth is good, but it creates challenges. And so what I certainly thought I'd talk about a little bit today is just tell you what we're seeing with that growth in our community. I know our police chief has been here and talked with you. He's a great man. Honestly, you could not draw up a better police chief for our community during this time. John Thune. Funny joke on that. We went, me and the chief went and served food at the Safe Home, which is a place where people experiencing really almost untreatable alcoholism can live and have a safe place to live. And they asked me, they're like, so why would the senator want to be the police chief? This guy says to me, I'm like, no, that's John Thune. This is John Toome. Like, oh, okay. So anyway, so Chief Toome's a great dude, great guy to be leading our city right now. He's got a lot of work in front of him. There's really kind of three main things that are kind of the guiding focus right now for our administration. If people say, what are your priorities? Kind of fall around three. And really, it's hard to have a lot of control over any of them. They are affordable housing, they are workforce, and they are crime. All right, those are the big three that I spend a lot of time thinking about, focused on, and I thought I'd unpack those a little bit. The first one, housing is very challenging right now. It's been challenging for several years. When I took office in 2018, housing was a focus for us. Well, the last couple of years, it's been almost impossible to put housing into inventory that's affordable, quote unquote. When we added 7,000 people last year, and so we permitted more housing units, multifamily units, apartments, houses last year in 2020, and I'll go back 2 years, 2020, than any time in our city's history. In 21, we broke that record again, and in 22, we broke that record by July. So that's how quickly building is happening in our community, just to try to keep up with the appetite for growth and for people who want to move here and who want to live here and who want to stay here. The problem with those units that we're building is a very small fraction of them will fall into what I'll call that affordable housing, workforce housing level. And it's because of labor costs, material costs, supply chain issues, land availability, infrastructure costs. It's really hard to get costs down to a level that someone who makes $15 an hour, $18 an hour can afford even an apartment. And so we spend a lot of time trying to, leverage our federal dollars, our HUD dollars, other things to make sure we can try and keep housing as low as possible. We just passed a 65-unit, single housing unit, what's called a TIF, Tax Increment Financing Project, which will put 65 houses in inventory over on the east side, and those will be between $204,000 and $340,000. Now, to some people, $340,000 is a lot. Some it's not much at all. But to some, a $204,000 new home, brand new home, is an attainable home. Okay, and we use tax increment financing to do that. But the only way we were able to get that done is we had to convince this developer to not build $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 homes where there's a lot of margin and he can make a lot of money, and to focus on this because this is where the need in our community is. And we gave him TIF financing, which is almost kind of like an incentive to put those homes in the inventory. So we have programs like that we're doing, but we have to convince the market to want to do them. We can't just as the city say, hey builders, we need you to build more $250,000 homes. They're like, this is America and I'm going to build $500,000 homes because that's where the money's at. So we're working on some of those creative solutions, like that was with a guy named Kelly Nielsen. Nielsen Homes, great guy, great builder. If you know him, thank him for doing that. He's kind of a trailblazer with this TIF project for that. So housing is a challenge. Doesn't mean we're going to give up on it. I'm a little worried about the next year and a half with what's going on with interest rates, what's going on with inflation, what's just going to happen with the economy. Wish I had a crystal ball to see what was going to happen. I think the midterms in a couple weeks, 10 days now, I guess, will drive some of that a little bit as well, in terms of consumer confidence and so forth. But economy's in a weird spot right now. Second thing, the workforce. So I don't understand how this works. If any of you can make sense of this for me, I would welcome it. But I don't know how we can add 7,000 people in 1 year and then be at our lowest unemployment in decades. It just doesn't make sense, right? So you add all these, like, where are they? What are they doing for work? How do we have so much unemployment? And it's a combination of things. It's a combination of, we're adding more industry to our community. There's a lot more jobs that are being created here. If you want a job in Sioux Falls and you can work, meaning you don't have an addiction or mental health problem, or you can get a job. But there's also, the pandemic created a new work culture in that, let's say I was doing accounting for a firm in 2019, and then the pandemic happened, and that accounting firm said, you're all going to work from home, for the next year. And now that employee has realized, I can do accounting for a company in Sweden, or a company in San Francisco, or New Orleans. So we have a lot more people in the community that are just working remotely. They're still in our community, but instead of working for Midco, they're working for someone in Denver, right? Instead of working for Sanford, they're working for someone in Tallahassee, remote. So the workforce has changed dramatically, which has made it harder to recruit people to want to work in. They love living here, but they're sometimes working other places. So are we getting the tax benefits of those folks? Yeah, I mean, they're still spending dollars here. They're still investing in our community, but some of them don't work here. And that's okay, because eventually they'll get sick of that job in Tallahassee and sick of staring at a computer screen all day, and they'll want to go and be in community with people, and they'll go take a job at Midco, or they'll take a job at Sanford. So gospel according to Paul, I think this is a little bit of a temporary time where this work from home thing is the trend, because I'm already seeing the pendulum swing back with cultures in terms of like work culture, and people are wanting to be back in community with one another in the office. And so we'll see how that changes. What we as the city are doing for workforce to attract and retain people is we're doing things on multiple fronts, but the biggest thing that we can do and that I can do is try and make a city that people want to live in and work in. And that means investing in your park system. It means making sure we have good infrastructure. It means supporting our schools and working with our school district on some of the education things. It means creating quality of life opportunities like our zoo and Jacobson Plaza downtown, and our park system and our bike trails and Washington Pavilion, Cinedome, planetarium gifts, and all these things that make Sioux Falls a place where people are like, this is a great city. There's a lot to do here. There's a lot to be thankful for here, and I want to live here. And we're seeing that's why only 4 other cities grew faster than us in the last year, because of the great quality of life that we have. And that is attracting people to our community. That third issue, which hopefully the chief and I are going to be speaking on the same page, because I don't know what he talked about in relation to crime, but I'll tell you my angle on crime is, as a city grows, it doesn't just grow with amazing First Presbyterian Church members. Sometimes you have some challenging folks that also move to your community when you grow. And so for the last decade, 10, 12 years, our crime per capita has stayed fairly flat. Okay? So what I mean by that is we average about 35 nonviolent crimes per 1,000 residents, and about 5 or 6 violent crimes per 1,000 residents. Okay? So when you add 7,000 people in 1 year, and you average 5 to 6 violent crimes per 1,000 residents, which we've averaged for the last decade, you can do the math. That's 35 more violent crimes you will have in 1 year, because you've added 7,000 people. So if it seems like, God, I hear about crime more, it seems like there's more crime, well, we've added more people. But we watch, the chief and I and our administration, we watch that per capita number. If that per capita gets from 6 to 7 to 10 per when that starts growing, you have a crime problem, and you have a growing crime problem. The biggest challenges that I see in crime in Sioux Falls and public safety in Sioux Falls, one is with our youth and youth violent crime. I just saw a report of a kid who shot another kid at 41st and Marion a couple nights ago. I mean, kids, one, they're kids because they're under 18. Two, they have guns, which they shouldn't have. And three, what happened in this kid's life that put him in this position where he's 17 years old with a gun and he's willing to use it? So our youth violent crime is probably the area that I worry about the most. And I know you learned about this, or you know about this community soccer initiative and some of these things going on. Those are very intentional efforts around giving kids creative outlets, putting them around police officers so they can start to see that a cop is your ally and not your enemy. Allowing some of our youth who maybe would be getting into trouble in someplace else to come mentor these kids playing soccer. So we couch it up under the guise of this is soccer and it's fun for everyone, but there's a big public safety play when you do community initiatives like this, especially for our youth. Second area of concern for me with crime is just we're a very pro Second Amendment state, and a lot of people have firearms in our state, and a lot of people aren't very responsible firearm owners. And so firearms get stolen out of cars a lot. That's why we preach all the time, lock your cars, lock your doors in your car. And so that kid who shot someone on the other side of town this week, he can legally get a firearm. So he got it somewhere. He got it legally somewhere. So we got to continue to preach responsible gun ownership. It's very important for people who own a gun to be responsible with their gun, because most of the time the crimes that occur in Sioux Falls with a gun, that gun has been illegally acquired somehow. So that's a concern. That's something that the chief and his team focus on a lot, and I'm sure you may have questions on that. And then the third thing about crime that we're working on a lot is the coordination between the entire criminal justice system. So the best way I can describe that is I'll give you an example. That on Labor Day, so in early September, we had a gentleman commit a homicide. He killed another guy in an apartment, and we arrested him after 6 hours, which is incredible that our cops, I don't know how they do this, but the guy committed a homicide. Within 6 hours, we got him arrested. And as soon as there's a homicide, two people get asked about it, the chief and me. What are you doing about crime? There's a murder. What are you doing about it? I said, well, that guy who committed that homicide has been arrested multiple times. Last year, he got a 9-year prison sentence, and he got paroled after 3 months. And within 4 months of his parole, he committed a murder. And he was also a parole absconder, which means the parole system lost track of him. He didn't check in with his parole officer, cut his band off, whatever. We had no idea where he was. And he killed someone. So when people say, Mayor, what are you doing about crime? I'm like, well, we arrested him 6 hours after he committed the murder. We've arrested him multiple times. He finally got a 9-year sentence, and he was out after 4 months on parole. So there's a breakdown in that whole system. The cops are doing their job. I could have had 1,000 more cops on the street that night. It wouldn't have prevented that situation. So there's a parole issue. There's a sentencing issue there. There's a correctional officer and parole system issue with Department of Corrections that we have to work through. So the chief and myself are talking more with the DOC, the Sheriff's Department, State's Attorney, the State Supreme Court on how they're sentencing people to try and make sure that the community, because I'm guessing most of you are outraged to know that a guy got a 9-year sentence for a violent assault and he's out on the streets in 4 months. Not right. But the system has some work and some change and some reform that may be needed. So enough about crime, because we're still a very safe community. This is still a very safe community. I have a chance every year to go and twice a year meet with other mayors and other city councilors from all over the country, and we get together. And let me tell you, their crime challenges and some of their housing issues and some of their challenges, ours pale in comparison to theirs. A lot of my friends in Texas, border towns, things that they're struggling with right now is very different than we're struggling with here. So I still am very thankful for this community, for the police department that we have, which is almost at full authorized strength. We never lost a lot of officers in the last couple of years, despite the fact that it's becoming very hard to be a cop. It's very hard for us to recruit cops anymore. That wasn't the case even 3 or 4 years ago. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll just take a few questions that you may have, is this isn't really about the city. It's just more a state of our society right now. You know, you have to be under a rock if you didn't know we have an election coming up, or you don't own a TV, or you don't have a mailbox. Politics is really gross right now. I hate it. I hate politics. Country is very divided. And it's been very divided since 2020 when we had what I always refer to as CPR. Okay, we had COVID, political tensions, racial tensions, all just, the gate just lifted up in 1 year and just exploded. And people are angry. There's this outrage culture in our community where you have to be mad about everything. Even Paul Pelosi, the speaker's husband who got attacked, skull fractured, it only took a couple hours, and man, this thing is so politicized already. And I'm like, this guy almost got killed. And we're turning this into a political thing. Everything becomes so political. And we fight over everything. And so me, in a nonpartisan office, I just spend a lot of time trying to keep the community unified. You don't see me getting involved in a lot of real political issues. And when I say political issues, things that are outside of my control. Do I have opinions on Roe v. Wade? Sure, I do. Does it do any good for me to gaslight on that topic when I have no authority over it? Not really. Okay? So people expect from a mayor to take care of the streets, keep us safe, keep the economy going. I'll let John Thune and Dusty Johnson and Governor Noem, they can handle all that crap, which I don't really want to fight about. I want to just make this community great. I did speak out against recreational marijuana. It's probably one of the first issues I've ever really waded into. That's pretty a hot button issue because I feel very strongly about that. I would sure take any questions if you have that for me, but I don't want to get into that. But we are in this outrage culture time. And so my ask of people always, especially people of faith and the church community and the evangelical community, is people are looking at us as believers on how we respond, how we love our neighbor in this very difficult time, how we can disagree with someone's position but still love them and still show respect to them and still listen to them. There's a lot of people in this community that I disagree with on things, and they disagree with me. I don't have a lot of enemies because I'm trying to respect people's opinions. And I think we've lost that. We've lost that. And I'm not sure how we're going to get that back, but it starts at the local level. And it starts the way we treat our neighbors when we walk outside of here. And it starts with what we do on social media, on the internet, and the stuff we share and don't share. And when I use the term One Sioux Falls, it's really what I'm meaning, is how do we keep this community feeling like we're one community. 200,000 opinions. Donald Trump won Sioux Falls he won it 52-48, I think it was. So this is a purple city, okay? The city's like a snapshot of America. So we have a neat opportunity to show people what unity can look like in a community of our size when we have such different opinions. So that's the second sermon you've gotten today. I'll shut up now. Now I'll just take some questions you may have. Yeah, ma'am. Go ahead.
Just a second. I stood in front of the mic.
Got
Sorry.
a Bob Barker mic to hand around there. I love it.
You know, I know that we've increased with our homeless population. Is there any future look at tiny home development or anything that helps do more than feed them and find them a place that moves them forward? Is there anything that seems to be really lacking?
Yeah, so Some of you in the room may be familiar with the Veterans Tiny Home Project that we're working on. Are you familiar with that, ma'am?
Isn't there
Are you? I've been talking about it, but have you heard of the Veterans Tiny Home Project? Okay, so that's one initial foray into the tiny home community, tiny home movement, where we're building 20-some homes for homeless vets, tiny homes. It's kind of behind Axtell Park back there. And we're going to use that as a model to see if it works, because the next step may be tiny homes for single moms, homeless single moms, or the challenge with a lot of our homeless community is that the underlying cause of their homelessness is not that they don't have a home, it's typically addiction and or mental health issues. So giving someone a home is a good first step, but if you're not treating some of the underlying causes of why they're homeless, that home isn't gonna last, and it's not gonna be taken care of. So thus places like the Link. I spent a lot of time the last couple of years getting a place called the Link up and running, which treats people with chronic addiction and mental health challenges, where they can go and get linked to the right resources. We had one guy last year, he went to the Link 56 times in 1 year because he was chronically drunk. And on the 57th time, he said, I'm done. I want to get help. And we put him in an inpatient treatment. We found an inpatient treatment bed for him. But it took him 56 times of having to go to detox before he finally said, all right, enough's enough. So like, this work is so hard and messy. So I share that just to say, if we just put up a bunch of tiny homes for the homeless, that it helps them with 10% of their problem, but the other 90%, which are typically some of those other challenges, we still got to make sure we're focusing on. Other questions? Okay, you next.
This is about the pork processing facility. I've read both the pros and the cons, and I think I understand all the economic things, at least that's been put out there. But the one thing that I don't know about, and it's kind of crucial in my vote, the people that are against it say that there's going to be a lot of dumping in the Sioux River, and it's going to use an inordinate amount of water. And I haven't heard the other side address that issue. Do you have any facts or figures on that?
Yeah, I don't know this pork plant issue. Tell me more about it. What is it? Well, I will say that I'm actively in litigation for a group that's suing me because I allowed this pork plant. So I have to be this is online, this is recorded, so I have to be very Switzerland on my remarks. So I'll just give you facts and will not give you any opinions here. Facts are, a company purchased land that was appropriately zoned for a pork plant. They expressed their desire to build a plant there. They went through all the permitting, all the siting, all the inspection process that any other business would do. Another group didn't feel that was the right location for a pork plant and got enough people to challenge it, which is also a legal process. This is what's great about America. So they got enough people to sign a ballot initiative, and the voters will get a vote on that if they think that's appropriate. When we have met with the people building the plant, they have to obviously make sure that we can support them from a water standpoint, which the city absolutely can. Discharging wastewater into the river. Waste does not get discharged into a river. Wastewater is treated. So that's just like saying these 7,000 new houses that we're building are all going to dump all their waste into our river. Yeah, they are. It's going to all go to our wastewater plant. It's going to get treated, and it's going to be drinkable when it comes out, and that's going to go into the river. It absolutely is. It's treated wastewater. That's how wastewater works. So water capacity is very manageable, and there's not waste being dumped into the river. Those are the facts. I'm going to
piggyback on Tom's question. How is our water supply? I mean, we know we're on Lewis and Clark. How many people can we keep growing into and still have enough water? I've heard somebody say 200,000 is our max. Is that correct or incorrect?
Yeah, there's no max in terms of people. There's max in terms of usage, how many million gallons a day we use. We still have a very, very abundant water supply for many, many years. But we're starting to look at what our next Lewis and Clark 2 is, what we're calling it, which is probably still a couple decades out. But we also we drilled a new, it's really nerdy, but a horizontal collector well last year, which just finished up. It's between here and Baltic. It's a well that then goes down and then goes out, and it's tapping the aquifers up there. That's going to add a lot more water. So we have a lot of aquifer in addition to Lewis and Clark yet to tap. I give a lot of credit to the forefathers of this city who paid a lot of money to get on the Lewis and Clark rural water system, because we have some of the lowest water rates, some of the lowest wastewater rates in this entire state, and we're one of the biggest cities. So our water supply is very good for quite a while, but our administration now is already starting to think about the investments that we're going to probably make in the next several years to set us up for 2040, 2050 out there. So this young lady had a question up here. Yeah.
I just wondered, when you were here last time, you talked about the link, I think you're calling it, the triage center. Have you seen a positive impact from that?
Very positive. So the link has been open about a year and a half, not quite. The link is a place, it's at 9th and Dakota, right next door to City Hall, where people who are experiencing addiction issues, behavioral health issues can go and either get sobered up. Our detox is there. So our cops find a guy drunk laying on your lawn right here. They will take him or her to the link. They will go through detox there. We will give them the ability to link them to other resources if they choose. A lot of times they don't choose to do that, but our detox is now in a humane environment. It used to be in jail. They'd give you a pad about this thick, put you in this windowless room. That was detox. Now the detox at the link is run by Avera. It's a much more humane process, if you ask me. It also gives them alternative resources versus detox at the jail was just sober you up, get you out of there. And so we have seen success. We've had like Mr. 57, we've had some cases like that. We're like, okay, we've saved some people's lives. We've extended their lives based on the additional treatment options we're providing. So it's a drop in the bucket though. Addiction is a huge problem. And so when I talk about narcotics are a big problem too in our community. It's tough because we're looking at introducing another vice in the community in 10 days, and I'm worried. I'm worried about what that does when we already have vices we deal with a lot. And I'm guessing if people had my view of dealing with a place like the Link for a year and a half, it maybe would change their opinion on the harmlessness of some of these narcotics, that they aren't a big deal, because they are a big deal. So.
What would you say is the biggest difference between leading in the public sector versus when you were a leader in the private sector?
Oh, such a great question. So much different. Some people will still ask, so my history before I became mayor again, I owned my own business for 11 years. I loved it. I had 35 employees. I could go to the grocery store when I wanted, I loved it. But as fellow people of faith, I hope you'll appreciate God just tugged on my heart to do this. And I didn't want to leave my job. I didn't want to leave my company. But when God puts something on your heart, sometimes when things are even uncomfortably put on your heart, it's a sin to ignore those. So that's the Holy Spirit talking in your life. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. And so when I started, the question I would get a lot was, are you running City Hall like a business? Like you did in the business? And it's like, well, in some ways, but in a lot of ways not, because the goal of business is profit. And if the city was a business, we wouldn't build a link and treat the same person 57 times, which probably cost us $100,000, that guy, easy. That's a bad business model, but it's a right people model. So you have to have a heart for people. So you have to shut off your business mind sometimes and say, God, that's a waste of money. Let me give you a real example, and it's probably an issue that's important in this room. Public transit costs so much money for the small population that actually use transit. But for those people who use it, it's their lifeblood. It's their only way to get around this community. And it's not good. I mean, I'd be the first to admit we don't have an efficient public transit system, and we keep trying to do something differently with it. So from a business standpoint, it's just a terrible financial drain. But from a people standpoint, it's a really critical investment for people. Paratransit, these things that people who need this. So in some ways it's the same, in some ways it's different. I think the hardest thing though is always being on display. And everything you say, everything you do, you get judged for it, you know, whether that's good or bad. And in the private sector, I could deal with a bad employee, fire them, have an issue, and Argus never knew about it. Now I have an issue, and it's like, oh, it's this big deal, and it gets, you know, everyone talks about it, and it's harder to have that anonymity.
Okay, I want to get back to the pork plant for just a moment. I know that from time to time Morels has some bad smells coming out of it, and probably better than it used to be, but it's still, we have to deal with it. And I wonder if you have any information about what the smells might be with this new pork plant.
Yeah, you know, again, I just got to be really cautious with how I talk about it, but I work downtown, you know, every day I'm downtown, and I will say, when I moved to Sioux Falls, and I've lived here 22 years and 20, there was days it would just absolutely stink. Today, I want you to really pay attention. When's the last time you're like, oh, this is unbearable? It's changed a lot. There's been a lot of investments that they've had to make and have made in their wastewater and in their odors, and that's a century-year-old plant. Technology's changed a lot too. So, I don't know. I can't, I'm not going to sit here and make any promises. That's for the company. There's no odor requirements that you can put in as a city, like you have a odometer or some meter that tests odor quality, air quality for a plant. Those don't exist. So you have to just go out their word. But what I can say is the way we built plants in 1910 is different than how we built them in 2023. So it will be different.
I know you said you wanted to look at politics in the rearview mirror. I don't blame you. So you don't have to answer this question if you don't care to.
All right, next question then.
However, what's your feeling on the amendment for Medicaid expansion?
Well, just palms up, I'm a proponent of it. But that's one I haven't weighed in vocally on. There's a gap of people in our community who just make just enough that they don't qualify for Medicaid now, but they don't make enough, or they don't have an employer who offers the benefits, so they're filling the gap. They're working 20 hours at Shipley's cleaning your shirts, and then they're working 30 hours at Chevy's cooking your food. They don't got benefits at either, and they're falling in that gap. And I think the humane thing is to cover them. Proponents will say that it's a good thing. Opponents will say it's another entitlement program, it's another handout, it's what if it goes away and now we have all these people that we have to cover, and can't see that happening. And the feds pay 85-90% of all the expansion costs. It's a small ding to the state budget for, I think, what it can do for people that are left in that gap. So.
Just a quick question. City expansion, what direction do you see that taking place?
Well, I'm not just trying to be a smart aleck here, but like every direction right now. The South, insatiable appetite to keep building homes to the South. We're doing a storm sewer study for the west side because there's a ton of growth happening on the west side, but we need more storm sewer and wastewater capacity. We need more basins so that we can build more homes to pump more wastewater to our plant. So those are tremendous investments to put in what's called the trunk lines so that developers can tie into that. West side, a lot. But then southeast, a lot of growth in southeast. If you've driven the southeast lately, where the Harrisburg Freshman Academy is growing, and you know, us in Harrisburg and us in T, we're almost kissing cousins at this point. We're so close. And then industrial north, you know, with what's happening with Foundation Park and Amazon. There's a lot of business growth happening to the north. So if you're looking to make an investment in land and want to know where a good place to buy is, any direction, you will be a good investment.
Any bridge has some kind of protection for people walking across it. One place that I find, I just don't understand why we haven't done anything, is the tunnel on 57th Street. If people are to go through there, that's one of the most unsafe places, and it seems like that would not be a huge thing to solve, to make it safe for people to go either direction there. Your thoughts?
Are you talking people going on the interstate over the top of it?
No, through the tunnel. Like on bicycles or pedestrians.
Oh, okay. Yeah, first time I've ever been asked that, so I haven't really ever thought about it. I'll say that the tunnel can't be widened, so I don't know what's in there, if there's room for lanes or bike lanes, or that's typically not you're right by the bike trail there, so I think the encouragement for people would be not to ride your bike down 57th. It's not a real bikeable road, but I don't know, it's a good question.
Well, I see people crossing there at times because they're going, sometimes I think people even walk to work through that, and I think it's raised a little bit, like maybe 4 inches. It would just be putting like a guardrail for them. But
Yeah, I guess I've never noticed. I personally have never seen anyone in that tunnel ever. I've never seen a person or a bike or anyone in there ever. But I'm maybe not going at the same times as you are. So.
Last week, Toon really challenged us to say, don't be doing nothing. Every little bit that you do makes a difference, so be at it, be doing something. So I'd like to ask you, common people sitting here, number one, I'm really challenged to remember to pray for you.
Thank you.
Only aware, as we're listening here, going, whoa, this is a lot of stuff you deal with all the time. So I think we need the reminder to say, let's remember you. But what could we do? I mean, would it help to tokens for the transit system? What are the small things that you see the common man could be of help to the city that we just don't think about?
Great question. Number one, by far and away, not even close to anything else, is to be a mentor to someone. And I know that sounds very cliche and corny, but that 17-year-old kid that pulled the trigger on another kid, who was mentoring that kid when he was 11, okay, or 12? The people living alone at Dalrymple Village who have no one in their life, who want someone to play cards with them. The immigrant family who doesn't know how to get health insurance or enroll their kids at school, needs someone to walk alongside them. The men and women, mostly men, getting out of jail right now. The people who are getting a legitimate parole and have been locked up for 7 years, and no one will touch them because they got a felony, and they don't want to live near them, and no one wants to employ them. They're people made in God's image, and they committed a sin and a crime, and they've served their time, and whether we like it or not, they're going to be in our community. So we have to make it successful, and we have to pour into them. So we started a program It's not really a program, it's more just a marketing campaign called Sue 52. 52 meaning there's 52 weeks in a year. If you could give an hour a week to mentoring, okay, 52 hours a year. You can go to sue52.org, or you can call the helpline center. You call 211 and you say, I want to mentor. And they will say, okay, what are you into? And you'll be like, well, I don't like kids, you know, I'm comfortable around felons because my brother-in-law was one or whatever, and I have experience with addiction. And they'll say, great, here's 2 organizations that would love someone like you to help, who need a mentor. And so Sue 52 just lines people up with the people in need. It's just a bridge in the middle. And everybody in this room, I guarantee you, has a skill or a quality that someone could use in this community. Could be a mentor. I see Claire here. Claire, you rocked 1 million babies in your time, didn't you? Served, just gave back to his community in a way, in a selfless way. I got a letter, this was 2 months ago, and it was from a guy up the hill in the pen. He said, Mayor, you're my last resort. I'm 43. I've been in prison for 22 years on and off. So I pretty much grew up in prison. I'm going to be paroled in June of 2023. I'm getting out. I have a felony, sexual felony. So I know I won't be able to find a place to live. The only place I'll be able to live will be in the shelter. And I can't be around all those type of people. So this guy's self-aware enough to know that, like, he needs help. And you know he has a year. And he's like, I need you to help me. I need you to help me find a place and maybe help me find a job. He's writing the mayor. And I'm like, what do I do with this guy? I'm like his only resort. So I'm like, that guy, I'd love to hook him up with someone who could start to get to know him for the next 8 months while he's behind the wall, so that when he's released, we got a plan for him so he doesn't end up like the Labor Day homicide guy, you know. So I just feel that, you know, Scripture is very clear on caring for the orphan, the widow, the foreigner, you know, the imprisoned. Very clear that that's what Jesus called us to do. And there's a lot of people in our community who fit those criteria, who need the church to help them. So it's not money, it's not bus tokens, it's not any of that. It's find a way to mentor someone in your community.
When you're talking about the link and Mr. 56, who is paying for his treatment? Is that Avera, taxpayer, or is that just up to him to figure out how to pay for that?
You mean once he decides, I want to go get treatment?
Or even just the triage?
All the 56 times? Yeah. That's being paid for by the city, the county, Sanford, and Avera. We're the 4 partners of that. So that dude, we could have bought him probably a house for what we spent on him, you know, but it wouldn't have fixed the problem of his addiction. So we pay for that. Sanford and Avera pay for that. And it's getting more and more costly to run a place like The Link. Again, back to my business world, it's a terrible business model to be running that. Then if he decides, hey, I want to get treatment, that's a whole nother set of expenses. That a lot of times treatment providers are so scarce that they oftentimes only take people who can pay, are payers or have insurance. So if I could wave a magic wand and build a treatment facility in the state that could treat 200 people at a time, I would do that and have it be free, because I think that would be hugely needed. It is hugely needed, but we don't have enough treatment facilities for a guy like that to link him to. He got help, and he was covered under, you know, some charity care program or something, but we need more of it. So, good question.
If his treatment on Challenge 57 is successful, how much money does the city and the state save over the next 30, 40, 50, 70 years?
Do we save money? I'm not sure we save money. We just don't have to expend money into him any longer. So we're not necessarily saving money. We're redirecting that onto the next person. So if he would have been 56 for 2 more years, okay, that's 112 more times at, let's say, $2,000 per time. It's $250,000 we would have had to spend. So you can either look at it as savings or look at it as it's money we can redirect to the next Mr. 56. So that's why the work is so important, because I talked about workforce. We need people who can work. The guy got a job too. He ended up getting a job. So now he's in the workforce. And he's making an income. And he's more than any of that, he has his dignity back. He's got his dignity as a person, right? Like, what's that worth to someone? Feeling like a human again, right? And feeling like you're who you were intended to be. So, any other questions? I know there's kickoff at noon, right? It's 11:30. Go Vikings. So, well, I want to thank you. We'll go one more question from that guy. All right.
You were talking a lot about the sewer treatment and all of this civil engineering that you seem to know a lot about. Before you were mayor, did you know anything about that stuff?
No, none. I didn't know how wastewater was treated. I didn't know how critical wastewater was. A city, this is so corny, but a city runs on wastewater. If your toilets don't flush or your shower drain doesn't drain, we got a riot in this community. And so very, very critical. So I've had to learn a lot of that stuff. So, but I want to thank this church. Thanks for letting me be with you this morning. Always an honor. Consider mentoring. Sioux52.org is that website if you want to learn a little bit more about opportunities in the community. So,
shall we thank the spirit of Dartmouth College?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got it. Open up my phone. One question. Be careful with the crowd.
Thank you.